Hey there, Nubia. So you sent us another set of essays. That's wonderful. Let's take a look at what you have done here. Okay, so we've got a pie chart showing information about mobile operating systems. So Android, iOS, Windows, something I can't read because it's too tiny, BlackBerry, and other. Okay, fine. Let me just extend the size a little bit so it can help me with some of your data. Bear with me for a moment. All right, that should do it. So let's see what you wrote. The pie chart depicts the use of 6 different mobile operating systems in percentages in September 2000. Well, careful. Look, first mistake here. You wrote September 2005, but it's actually September 2015. So make sure you're accurate. Remember that your introduction to this is the first impression the examiner has of your writing. So it's very important that you're accurate, both grammatically and in terms of your data and information. Okay? All right, so let's move on. It can be seen from the graph. Well, careful, it's not a graph, it's actually a chart. Remember, it's a pie chart, so use the correct vocabulary. So it can be seen from the chart that while the market is clearly led by Android and iOS, good, the use of the other operating systems is minimal. Actually, minimal is the right word rather than minimum. I like this, but there is one change I would like you to make, and it's the placement of while. So let's try it a little differently, okay? It can be seen from the graph that the market is clearly led by Android and iOS, while the use of the other operating systems is minimal. I know it probably doesn't make sense to, I don't know, maybe it makes sense to you, but maybe it doesn't make sense to other people listening to this correction. But what happens is basically the focus of your emphasis changes when you move the placement of while here. Okay? I don't know if I can explain that really more clearly. Let me see if I can. I really can't. Actually, grammatically, they're both correct. However, I feel that for this to make sense and to read more clearly, it makes sense to put the while in the middle of the sentence here because it's kind of like it makes sense to us that we're going to hear what leads the market. So yeah, it's clear from the graph that the market is clearly led by Android and iOS. Okay. However, but in contrast, or while the use of these other operating systems is minimal again. Okay, so it's a more logical placement of this linker. Okay, I hope that makes sense. I really do. Anyway, if it doesn't, let me know. Let's move on though. No, as a matter of fact, we don't really write that. This is an expression that we would most commonly use in spoken speech, not so much in a writing task. So try to avoid it, okay? So for the time being, let's use nothing here. And let's say instead, 4 out of 6 operating systems merely accounted for, no, the placement of merely is wrong. 4 out of 6 operating systems accounted for a mere 7.2% of the use in September 2015. Again, with the accuracy. What you need to do here is you have to make it absolutely clear that it's the total of them, okay? Make it clear that 4 of them together, okay? And I'll tell you another thing that I think is rather strange. I think it's rather strange to start your details by talking about the smallest figure. It's far more logical to talk about Android here, which has the real majority at 53 point something percent. Okay, so I have to disagree with your decisions to start by talking about the smallest figures in this graph. It's not really logical. In general, I want you to understand that these task ones are essentially a top-down kind of description, meaning that we talk about the biggest, the largest, the most obvious, and then we kind of go further down. Okay, that's not a hard and fast rule. Sometimes we talk about the highest, and then we talk about the lowest, and then we talk about the in-between. But here, in this sort of situation, where you have the highest and the lowest and nothing in between, it really makes far more sense for you to talk about these two first and then talk about this. I would not have chosen to talk about those little minuscule percentages first, okay? In any case, you decided to do that, so let's see what you said about it. 4 out of 6 operating systems accounted for a mere 7.2% in total of the use of mobile operating system use in September 2015. The least used of this group were, you can't say the least were, because the least is always one. All right, the most and the least is always one. So the least used of this group were BlackBerry at 1.16, followed by what is that? Lavender. Other, I don't know, I think it's other, at 1.3%. Okay? Double this percentage, or rather double these percentages, were Symbian and Windows with 2.3 and 2.4% respectively, or rather each respectively. Okay, so you really have to be careful with the language here. The language is rather formulaic. It's very specific. So it should have been Symbian with 2.3 and Windows with 4.3 each respectively. So let's move on. In contrast, the remaining 92.8% of the market was held by only 2 operating systems, Android and iOS. The latter had a 39.43%, not get rid of the A, had 39.3% of the usage in September 2015. Again, wrong date. Not locating it. Making it the second most popular operating system in use, only outranked by Android, which boasted a 53.37%, being the most widely used operating system. Okay, again, I've explained to you that I disagree with the way you decide to organize this. I would have started talking about Android. I think that these percentages are so enormous and so impressive that it really made sense to spend some time talking about Android. Look at this. I mean, this is the only thing you really said about Android, and it's essentially the last sentence in your paragraph, which for me is not giving it the importance that it deserves. Okay? I mean, when you look at this graph, it's the first thing that you see. You see that big kind of green mass here. And so you really need to talk about that first. Okay? Then you could talk about the difference between it and iOS. There's like a what? A 14% difference. Okay, so after you've talked about Android and how enormous its market share is, you can talk about its second most popular competitor, which is iOS, which at 14% less, specifically at 39.4.3. These two together hold 92.8% of the market. Okay, the remaining 7% is held by 4 companies, specifically ABCD, okay? And then you can go into those figures. So I would really, really reorganize all of this. All right, so that's my feedback on there. Now, why are we talking about this? Just so that you know, because I know you said that you need a 7.5. Because you need a 7.5, I'm going to be rather strict, okay? What we're talking about here and what my whole kind of focus is on the way you organize your ideas, this is all about coherence and cohesion. And coherence and cohesion is more than just about paragraphs and more than just about linkers. It's also about the way you organize your ideas. So if you look at the pain descriptors, it says logical or perhaps illogical organization of ideas. And that's what I'm trying to make you understand, is that this is not the most logical way to organize your ideas. The more logical way is to start with this huge percentage here, this, and then go into those little itty bitty things. Okay? Let's move on now. Global environmental problems should be dealt with internationally. What is your opinion? All right. Over the years, the concern about our environment and the issues related to it have been growing. Why does it have? Because you've got two things, concern and the issues, two separate things. So, plural. Although there are, although, all right, I don't know what happened here with your grammar. Although some are of the thought that countries should unite forces to face these issues together, I strongly believe that each country should cope with them individually for the reasons presented below. All right, fine. Careful with your grammar here, okay? To begin with, it is well known that the ways countries pollute are different from one another. This means that not all the nations around the world should sharpen their efforts on reducing CO2 emissions or on halting deforestation, for example, since each country's industry has a unique focus. All right, here I really wanted some explanation. All right, give me an example. Like, tell me, what is Canada doing compared to China? What is India doing compared to maybe Brazil? Okay? In this way, joining efforts would be fruitless since overall initiatives to tackle pollution would prove ineffective. For instance, taking worldwide actions to prevent ocean pollution. Get rid of the apostrophe S. Is completely useless in countries like Bolivia, which have no sea. Why does it have? Because it's countries which have no sea. Bolivia is just an example. All right, so make sure that you recognize what your lead noun is. It's countries. Furthermore, if global environmental issues are approached locally rather than globally, individuals' actions are easier to control. All right, now here when you write individuals, it's as if one individual. Careful, you don't mean that. You mean individuals plural. Or alternatively, you could have just used it as an adjective and said individual actions are easier to control. Each nation's idiosyncrasy is peculiar to every nation's idiosyncrasies, plural, are peculiar. You don't mean peculiar. You mean something different. You mean are particular. So let's try it again. Every nation's idiosyncrasies are particular to their own citizens, which in turn makes some of their behaviors detrimental for the environment in a unique way. This makes each country's government the only one entitled to deal with its own people. A case in point is rural Latin America, where cooking over open fire is as common as polluting, and it can only be tackled by local governments. Don't forget your full stop here. All in all, I assert local actions to deal with environmental problems. Let's see. There's something wrong with your grammar here, but let me read it again. All in all, I assert local actions to deal with environmental problems because each national industry pollutes in a very unique way as well as... All right, no. There's clearly something wrong with your grammar. You're missing a verb. It's actually assert is the wrong word. So, all in all, I support local actions to deal with environmental problems because each national industry pollutes in a very unique way, as well as each people does, I guess that's pollute, depending on their customs, both which can only be controlled by their own authorities. All right, that's fine. Like I said, assert was the wrong word. Now, you've got a nice essay here. It's nice. It's good, Nubia. But there are some problems. Now, essentially, let me explain to you something, if I may. When you are aiming for a 7.5, it means that if you've got 12 scores for your writing, it means that the majority of them need to be at an 8. Okay? So when you start to write, I want you to take a look at those band descriptors for both task 1 and task 2 and understand what an 8 means. All right? Because that's what you're aiming for. You are aiming for all 8s And when you aim for all 8s, you can fall to 1 or 2 maximum criteria for the 7. Okay? And the reason why I'm telling you that is because I am holding you to a far, far higher standard than a lot of the students who send us in essays. A lot of them are just aiming for a band 7. Some of them are even aiming for a 6.5. But since you are aiming for such a high score, it means that you really have to do very, very high level work. This for me needs a lot of work in order to get a 7.5. It's rather brief. It was 260 words. Now I know you're thinking, okay, well, the word minimum is 250. That doesn't matter. You have to develop this to a very, very high degree in order to look at a band 8. Okay? Your coherence and cohesion was fine. I didn't really see anything that particularly bothered me or was obtrusive or anything like that. So I thought you fared rather well there. But the grammar and the vocabulary they also needed some work in order to get you to a band 8. Okay? So those are some things that I want you to think about. I don't know when your exam is. Maybe you wrote it test in your email, but I don't recall seeing it anywhere. But I'd like to see more work from you. I want to see you signing up. Ideally, I'd like to see you signing up to our essay correction packages so that you can write more, so you can get feedback from us, so we can tell you what a weakness is and what a strength is in your writing so that you can work on these and get to where you need to be. Okay? So with that, I want to wish you lots of luck. Like I said, it's a nice essay, but you have a high goal. It's a high goal in general for anybody. And so I want us to help you with it. Okay? And I know we can if we work together. So think about it. Let me know what you decide. And I look forward to seeing more work from you soon.